Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is Eisenherz with a new mini-series on how to become a cEDH master. This series will focus on some key factors you can work on to master a cEDH deck and play it to its fullest potential. Today I'm going to address something that I tend to struggle with when playing a new deck: working memory and automated actions. Most of you know this weird feeling you get when you drive back home from work, pull into the driveway and suddenly realize that you can't remember how you actually drove home. This moment of minor dissociation happens because the many actions you take while driving, like watching traffic, using your turn signals, stopping for lights, shifting to the right gear and merging lanes, are so engraved in your mind that you don't have to consciously think about any of them. Your brain automated all of those movements and actions, which frees up your working memory and consciousness to think about other things, like how much you hate your job and how much you want to play cEDH once you get home. Now, this experience of minor dissociation while driving home from work and the ability to focus on literally anything else stands in stark contrast to your first few weeks of driving. While you might have been able to handle operating a car on an empty parking lot, you might have felt a sensation of being overwhelmed as soon as you drove into actual traffic. Now, all of a sudden, your working memory was occupied with multiple things at once. People on the sidewalk, traffic lights, cars in front of you, to your left, to your right, behind you, maybe a police siren in the distance, and suddenly it happens. You forget to put the right gear in and stall the engine. This is because, as a beginner, none of the actions you take while driving is automated or engraved into your mind. Everything you do is processed on the spot by your working memory, and that working memory, just like the RAM in a PC, has a limited capacity. Generally speaking, people can only keep track of 7 different items with their working memory, plus or minus 2 items. This is commonly referred to as Miller's Law. So how can we use this information about working memory to become a cEDH master? Well, piloting an unfamiliar cEDH deck is very similar to learning to drive a car in traffic. You might already know the cards, just like a student driver knows where the steering wheel or the clutch is located. You might also already know the combos and lines, just like a student driver knows how to shift gears and make a safe left turn. But all of those actions and recalls are very conscious and take up slots in your working memory. In a low-stress situation, like when goldfishing or on an empty parking lot, you can easily and safely recall all the information you need and use them to pilot your deck or drive a car successfully. However, in a high-stress situation, like in a tournament game or in heavy traffic, relying on your working memory to process all the available information and thereby consciously making all the necessary decisions and taking all the necessary actions will lead to failure. This is because your working memory can only hold around 7 items at a time. The amount of information you need to process in a typical game of cEDH, however, is just too large for your working memory to successfully handle, so you will naturally be preoccupied with your own game actions, which will make you overlook threats or hate pieces. It will make you punt your lines because you sequenced them wrong or are short a single mana, or it will simply make you not see a winning line when you actually had one. Imagine a typical scenario of cEDH. You have around 14 cards in hand because an opponent fed your Mystic Remora attempting to win the game. You look at your hand and see a winning line to win with Final Fortune and Underworld Breach, but you aren't sure how much mana you need to pull it off, how many cards you need in your graveyard to escape your tutors and still be able to win, and how much mana you need on top to protect your winning line. So while your opponent's wrapping up their turn, you are going through the line in your head, figuring everything out right then and there. You sneak in an extra turn with Final Fortune, you untap and silence your opponents in your upkeep, you start your line, and midway through you realize that you screwed up. You can't win because your Mox Ember is offline. You punted a safe win, but not because you didn't know your lines or didn't have a win in hand, but because your brain was preoccupied with so many items of information at the same time that you missed the most obvious things. Just like a student driver might forget to check a blind spot when merging lanes and, well, punt a safe ride home. So in order to become a cEDH master, you will need to free up your working memory, and that's only possible by engraving all the necessary game actions into your mind and have them be completely automated. When a combo line is engraved into your memory and you can recall it automatically, you will immediately know how much mana you need, how many cards you need, and how to properly sequence it. Basically, this means that seeing a certain combination of cards in your hand or on the board will automatically recall the necessary information and connections in your memory, without taking up any of the slots of your working memory. Your working memory will be free to consciously check for what else is happening on the board. You can now check your mana resources, you can recount the cards in your graveyard, you can check the board for hate pieces, you can check your opponent's side of the board for open mana and cards in hand, without being preoccupied with what you're actually trying to do. You will be able to talk more freely, ask more questions, check for interaction, play it cool, and maybe even bluff, because you aren't checking your graveyard repeatedly and silently staring at the wall, calculating the mana you need to win. So here are a few tips on how to transfer your game actions and decision making from your short-term working memory to your long-term procedural memory. Repetition, practice, and application. Repeat your lines over and over to engrave them in your long-term procedural memory. Practice in pickup games and make sure to actually perform your lines as often as possible instead of shortcutting as soon as a win is in reach. I can't stress enough how important repetition and experience is. It seems so obvious, but the difference it makes is immense. By repeating, practicing, not shortcutting, focusing on the details, goldfishing with actual cards, and visualizing your lines with actual cards in your hand, you will make a lot of progress fast. Chunking. Break down complex lines and situations into chunks and create checklists that you can go through to see if a certain winning line is possible or not. Just like a phone number isn't memorized digit by digit, but by chunks of numbers, it is really helpful to create chunks of information like 3B, 2U, 4grave, or whatever kind of chunking works for you in order to engrave lines into your procedural memory. Association. Link new lines to already established ones. If you know the basic lines to win the game, see how and if any new line fits in. If it's just one extra step, well, there you go. You only need to remember that one extra step, and the rest of the information is already engraved in your procedural memory, which will free up your working memory. And finally, I think it's important to understand that once you have reached a point of automation, you will have to very consciously check yourself from time to time. Just like experienced drivers tend to get sloppy in traffic and maybe forget to look over the shoulder when merging lanes, advanced cEDH players can become sloppy or stuck with certain lines and plays. Constantly checking yourself will make sure that you keep performing at the highest level. And remember, the better you know your own game, the better you can focus on your opponent's game. And that's it. Stay tuned for more parts of this mini-series. Thank you for watching my videos. Make sure to like, share, comment and subscribe. This is Eisenherz and auf Wiedersehen.